So today's talk will be a bit dialogic between Dean Press and Ms. Kusanovich, after each of them share some initial orienting ideas on their own. So now I will introduce our two wonderful speakers. Daniel Press began as the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Santa Clara University in July of 2020. Before joining us as Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, he taught at UC Santa Cruz for 28 years, where he helped establish the Environmental Studies PhD, a master's degree in coastal science and policy, and an agroecology bachelor's degree program. Press served as UC Santa Cruz's executive director for the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems, raising substantial funds for the program's facilities and staff. His research is in the area of environmental policy and industrial ecology, and he is the author of 3 books on US environmental politics and policy. In addition to being dean, he is also on the faculty of the SU Department of Environmental Studies and Sciences. Kristin Kusanovich, an alum of SCU who studied dance and math before earning her MFA in dance and choreography at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, is in her 21st year as a lecturer at Santa Clara University in the Department of Theater and Dance and the Child Studies program. Her expertise is modern dance technique and choreography, theater arts, vocational discernment and the business of the arts, children's movement experiences, kinesthetic learning, and on how creativity shapes society. She is a prolific writer with over 30 publications, including several published one-act plays, a co-authored book on creative methods in teacher leadership, and has led dozens of workshops and peer-reviewed conference presentations on interdisciplinary methods applied to leadership internationally. The former president of California Dance Education Association, she is an arts advocate of arts education for all and teaches about the legislative process in her civic engagement course. She collaborates with Santa Maria Urban Ministry in training the next generation of arts educators and has designed a visual and performing arts program for San Jose youth focusing on climate justice, featured tomorrow night in a 6 p.m. headliner. She is also a professional director and choreographer, having created over 100 works for the concert stage in modern dance, theater, musical theater, experimental and liturgical drama, opera and film, and video. She began the tUrn project in the fall of 2019. So now I will pass it off to our wonderful speakers.
I guess that's me first, huh, Kristin? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Minori. That was wonderful. Well, welcome, everyone. Very pleased to welcome you here on a very beautiful April afternoon that you could be outside in rather than on the screen again. So I feel like every time people are electing to be in a remote presentation or meeting, I have to give gratitude because we've had so many of them and we're all getting a little worn down from them. But here you are joining us anyway. So thank you for that. Yay. And thank you, Kristin, for pulling this together. Kristin asked me to give a little bit of a welcome about tUrn this spring and some points about tUrn and about how marvelously vast it has become. And so it reminds me of what happens when a forest starts to get big and grow together, where the canopy closes up and there are connections above ground and below ground and in the air, and you can not even encompass it all because it has gotten so interconnected and vast. And that's what tUrn feels like when I think about this week. I think it's so vast, I can't hold it in my head. So here I'm going to try to give a sense of it per Kristin's notes. So tUrn tUrn is a collaboration among many, many on campus and off campus between the Environmental Justice and Common Good Initiative, the Center for Sustainability and its programs like Sustainability Liaisons and the Forge. By the way, the Forge is accepting reservations for its plant sales. So if you want to get some nice starts in the ground, early May, don't miss it. The Environmental Studies and Sciences Department, the Climate Crisis Research Group for faculty and staff, and over 25 other centers and departments, over 60 faculty and staff who have partnered with one or more of the 4 tUrn weeks so far. 20 students are helping to moderate sessions and do a lot of behind the scenes work for this project. Thank you, students. There are 27 readers of the Laudato Si on Wednesday. There are 16 presenters at the student-led Good Market on Friday, and 103 people speaking or moderating. If you count everybody, there are 103 people speaking or moderating for tUrn events this week. 103. That's not bad. Kristin, you've got 103 people to participate. It's good. Very large conference here on the campus, drawing over 1,000 people in each of the tUrn weeks. We have gone from having one university partner with Creighton to now 9 university partners, 8 of whom are Jesuit universities, 6 of whom are co-presenting or moderating tUrn events this week with Kristin. And that's really wonderful, wonderful to reach out to our brothers and sisters around the country. There are 13 international environmental organizations from countries such as Nigeria, Afghanistan, Singapore, and Spain, now partnered with tUrn, doing either their own climate crisis events in their own time zones and languages this week, or attending some headliners here. There are 30 headliners and events, over 30 headliners and events. They run from 8:15 in the morning to 9:30 p.m. for 5 days. See, that's why I mean I can't capture it all. 4 events feature Spanish language or Hispanic culture, and 5 focus on indigenous rights, perspectives, worldview, leadership, or creativity. New to this week's tUrn are the Climate Action Power Hours each night at 8:30, where people can gather and reflect on the day, meet others, and work on some of the action and advocacy items from each day's headliners. And on Friday, the Power Hour will be over at 6:30 p.m. So if you've attended a headliner any day, check out the Power Hour that evening. And finally, if you have RSVP'd for the Tune Up on Saturday, the 24th, you'll get instructions emailed to you Friday night about ideas for conducting a self-guided Saturday morning retreat for an hour. And then we will meet at 11 a.m. for a contemplative and reflective session about the whole experience of tUrn. So that's the week in the little nutshell. Kristin, over to you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And thanks everyone for being here. It's really great to see you all. And if you are comfortable with the video on, it's fantastic just to see you there and breathing and having your tea or whatever might be happening. So I don't think I can capture it all either, Daniel. And I think I created tUrn because it was what I needed to help me get a grip on this climate crisis. Not that you can have a grip on it, but just I really needed to understand it from a lot of different perspectives. And so I ran across so many interesting people from different disciplines that had a way in to understanding it and a way of expressing it, and then different ideas about what we should do about it that kind of seem to be different, but then they all sort of coalesce in some sort of major themes, which we hope to cover again and again this week. But it seems like no matter who I talk to, their life experience is going to be completely unique and different than mine or yours or anybody's. But where we're all coming to, what we need to do is sort of kind of a short list in a way. And that's interesting. And that to me is kind of hopeful that you could fit it on a piece of paper on what we need to do. Some people fit it in a text once in a while. So this is about tipping points. And one of the reasons I wanted to start with this idea of tipping points is I wanted to hold in this headliner, this is one of our 30 headliners, what I would call some space for much needed grief. And I wanted to open up with this importance of talking about our losses, because my experience and the advice I get from my elders is, if you don't talk about the grieving process while it's happening, before you've lost someone if possible, and after, those things get submerged and they come out in sometimes difficult ways. They make our lives a little bit more difficult. So I thought that with the climate crisis, we have already lost beings and phenomena and potentials. And all of those are cause for some sorrow, and maybe a lot of other emotions as well. I think we all can understand that the climate crisis is a very complex phenomena emotionally, because we are nature, we are a part of nature, and that we know instinctively that something is going on that's off with the world, because we can feel it in our bodies, particularly those of us for whom that is what we do for a profession. That is all we do, is feel things in our bodies. So that is, I think some people are noticing this very profoundly. This destabilized feeling is that we have. We might say it's psychological. We might say it's anxiety. We might call it a lot of things, but really because we're a part of nature and nature is suffering. If we weren't suffering before already, we are now. And so some people on top of that are already suffering. So there's so many layers and reasons to grieve. When we think about losing a friend or a family member, or an animal going extinct, or a plant or bird or insect species going extinct, or a coral system, a glacier, rivers, all these beings, when we think about them going away, there is a sense of loss. And there are some things that we have lost, such as, let's just take species extinction, where those things will not come back. And I just don't think there's a lot of space to process that and to say that. So I was curious today if people might be willing to take a minute to think about something, someone, whether it's due to climate crisis or not, that you have lost and that you would like to just honor by naming. And it could also be an abstract concept. It could be anything you would like. And whatever you're comfortable sharing, if you would like to type that into the chat, we will just honor that by reading it. So feel free to keep the thoughts flowing if there's something that comes to mind. I see we're in the wonderful tipping point cascade effect here of ideas, because the imagination works that way. So bees, of course, we know the bee colonies are collapsing in number and dying off at unprecedented rates due to pesticides used in agriculture found in their systems. Seabirds, from oil spills and from the toxicity of certain oceans, ocean coastal areas, and from plastics and maybe other causes. Certainly some of those species are gone. And in some places, the sound of birds is either far less than it used to be or gone. Coastal communities and ecosystems, because of thermal expansion and rising water levels, thermal expansion from the heat of global warming, and the people themselves and the ecosystems themselves are no more. Those living on island nations especially, a lot of indigenous people all over the world, and people just living peacefully from anywhere. They are having to, as someone said, teach their cat to swim. So that's not a good situation. Marx says the balance of nature, and Not that we know all the species that are gone, but we know that they are going extinct at an unprecedented rate. I guess I should say the last time that they went extinct at this rate, it was the fifth mass extinction. And that's why some people are calling this time period the sixth mass extinction, because according to scientists, when you lose species at over 100 times the normal rate, that is one of the definitions or triggers to proclaim a mass extinction might be starting or underway. And then iris vaquita dolphins and the monarch butterflies, Odile, the landscape of my childhood, and healthy food. Salmon, clean water that you can play in the rivers and streams. Temperate California weather, the celebrated temperate weather. What's happening, wet, cold winters, warm summers, but not ablaze, and clean air for all. Snow. Growing up in a developing country where not everyone has clean running water from tap, from Lourdes Barreto, and the abundance we read about the past. Those lost in the 2017 Montecito mudslides, those lost in recent wildfires, the sacred sites of indigenous people that are being or have been destroyed by colonialism, capitalism, and the climate crisis. Those are the new 3 C's I think we need to put our minds on. And then Iris says, and also those people themselves, their homes, their food, their knowledge, and their wisdom. So I thought we would just take a moment of silence to hold these beings and these beautiful lives in our minds and in our hearts, and honor the fact that we do need to grieve. Thank you. The sense that I wanted to share, and that you shared better than I could have with your list and your ideas is, and your feelings, is that we've lost some things that we cannot make whole again. And when we speak about climate tipping points, we're talking about large systemic things that we would call losses from the human point of view, that are also irreparable. So once past, unless we participate, in a sort of a collective upheaval for the good, we will see these things past. And this is where our purpose and our commitments come in. But if you think about what was written about 5 years ago, when there was a lot of hopefulness, maybe that hopefulness is coming back now, but if you think about where we were at in 2015 as a country, not knowing what was about to happen, and where we were with the Paris Climate Agreement and Laudato Si coming out from the Vatican, and where the environmental and climate movements were, there was a sense that we were on the right track, or trying to get there, and that we had, we had no option but to come together and fight this climate crisis, and we're going to make it. But we've since then we've passed the 1 degree Celsius rise in temperatures from the pre-industrial era, and we're well on our way to 1.5 according to those who measure. And these are the things that we thought might happen only if we went, above 5 or 6, or some people say 8 degrees have either happened or are starting to happen. So there's a sense that things are coming along faster than even those who've had their minds and eyes and their math on this had predicted. So there's some sense in which the scientists tend to be conservative in their predictions of negative outcomes, because they are the last people. If you have friends who are scientists, you'll know they're not alarmists, right? They do not want to be dramatic like the theater majors, and they don't want to throw anyone off and say something that is more devastating sounding than it really is. So there's a kind of a natural conservatism built into the reporting and findings of science so that you can be replicable and official and follow all the rules. But perhaps that might have led us to a place where even scientists now are a bit taken aback by the cascading effects of various things. The lack of summer ice in the Arctic was one of the first ones to go, and that was a tipping point we passed, I think, back in 2015, according to articles I read and their dates. The fact that the ice wouldn't last through summer was a harbinger of the fact that now we're worried about the ice being there at all as it cascades and all the fresh water flows into the ocean. So climatic tipping points, I have a little graph that I would like to show you just because I think it helps hold them all together in one headspace. It's not the greatest quality picture, but my colleagues in environmental studies will at this point be rolling their eyes and saying, Kristin, you should have asked me for a better climate tipping point graphic. But these green dots are just a few of the tipping points that people note. And the Arctic sea ice melting in the summer, the receding ice in the summer is normal, but to not be there was with the abnormality that we now have. And the winter ice and the glaciers, the sheets falling apart. And many people from Santa Clara University have traipsed up there. Students and faculty and staff have gone up there and felt the ice falling apart underneath their feet. They've seen it turning into water, and they come back charged up. And I think we all just have to imagine a little more what that's like and how that might motivate us to get super involved in all this. The permafrost thaw in Canada, it's thought that there's a ton of methane in that, which is a super powerful greenhouse gas that traps heat. And also long hidden disease is trapped in the permafrost, and things that would obviously cause other pandemics beyond this first one that we're experiencing here globally. The permafrost thaw in Eastern and Northern Asia also has the same issue. As you can see, these are connected areas in the world. Methane and long frozen diseases being loosened from those. We know the Amazon rainforest, which provides, is the lungs of the earth and provides a huge percentage of oxygen. They're facing droughts and forest fires. Both of those things encroach, but humans are encroaching maybe even more than all those natural forces on the rainforest, because we're continuing to haul out everything we can get from it, and even chop down things just so we can grow feed for cows so that we can have In-N-Out burger, as my indigenous guest Shannon Rivers said earlier. The coral reefs you see there, one example above Australia there, and we see that because of rising water temperatures, that very fragile ecosystem just cannot last, and so they're bleaching, they're turning white. I choreographed a dance about this at the Mayer Theater last year, and I had the dancers be all the parts of the coral reef, and then people came and took parts away, and then it just all disintegrated. And I asked the lighting designer to just put like a cold white light on the stage, and it was an incredible effect, and it just brought you right there. And then the Antarctic ice sheet is also, the melting there is accelerating. So these are just a few of the temp changes and the ecological changes and the climatic changes, the weather changes, and what's going on with what's coming out of the earth because it's being uncovered by warming. There are some other tipping points which are more of the ecological side and the biological when it comes to animals and species being lost, where if, if, for example, they say if the ants went away, we wouldn't last much longer, because we need ants to make soil and to aerate and to make things eventually arable. And there are certain of these creatures that are so tied in directly to our lives, and others that are indirectly, but it's all one giant network. So the tipping points are those. And what I wanted to turn to now is the idea that as we go through tUrn Week, or as you go through any kind of climate education, or you're already educated in all this, I'm sure, there are things we need to do to not just learn how to mitigate the fact that there's a climate crisis, but actually prevent it from getting worse. And there are many, many things we can do, including divesting, which I'm seeing in the chat, and also including creating positive tipping points from a social pressure point of view. And the social pressure of a small group being very vocal can help tip the majority of people who believe that we need to do something but are not, let's just say they're silent. The majority of the people in the world believe we need to do something about the climate crisis but are silent about it. And then a minority is very vocal. And if that vocal minority can make it permissible for everyone else to say, yeah, I'm not going to shop at a company that does that either, or polluters are going to pay immediately for that pollution, or something that's going to be a consequence for it. There's going to be a financial consequence, economic, social. We will not go to Wells Fargo anymore, whatever it is. These kinds of things can be positive tipping points. And I know Daniel had some really great ideas about what those might be. And so we thought we'd banter a little bit about that in our last few minutes together and just kind of go back and forth on some of the great ideas.
Thank you, Kristin. I'm just going to have a few remarks because I hope that we can get some questions or some comments also. When Kristin was asking me to participate and we were thinking about tipping points, I channeled my inner optimist, my inner hope, and I thought of what it is that we tell our children, what it is that we tell students who are going to be living with and through the climate crisis more than their elders, I always feel it's a non-starter, or let's say a non-ender, put it that way, to just talk about the catastrophe of climate crisis and not focus on what it is that not just what we can do about it, but what we are doing or what some positive tipping points are. And so because we are hopefully emerging into something other than complete lockdown pandemic. Maybe it's not over yet, but there's a movement here. I wanted to reflect a little on what the pandemic has done as a tipping point and how that might be something to build on. So I'm going to share my screen here for just a few slides. Right after it became clear that there was a pandemic and there were some shutdowns, you start to see emissions come down. And these are in different sectors. This was in a Nature climate change report that was published just months, a few months after the beginning of the pandemic. And so you can see that there's tremendous drop in global emissions, not in the residential sector, which is what you'd expect because everybody's at home. And if they're still at home and if they have, if they are able to pay for power, they're still using it and still have emissions associated with that. So there's a drop there. Now, it is also the case that emissions have rebounded also. So I don't want to be Pollyanna about it. the red line here, I guess it's red, is 2020, and the top line is 2019. And so you can see emissions are dropping in 2020 deeper than they would seasonally in 2019. But then you have this rise back up here. So it is certainly not permanent as a drop, but I'll come back to that in a second. And then I just wanted to, from the annual energy outlook that the Energy Information Administration puts out, I wanted to remind everybody that the biggest growth in electricity generation in this country is projected to be in renewables, and that growth has been accelerating very quickly. And here is the projected trajectory of renewables in the US. So pretty dramatic changes from not very long ago. Now, I don't recommend having a global recession and a pandemic to drop your emissions. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we should do that. What I am saying is that there are moments when you can see dramatic changes if people are really galvanized and people are really see the crisis and see the collective action that has to happen in it. I don't think we're in this country that we're ever going to return to a large scale coal-fired electricity sector. It is now competitive to renewables are now competitive with fossil fuels in electricity generation. This is something I never thought was going to happen, or I didn't think was going to happen for years. For the first 15 years of lectures that I would give students on electric power production in the US, I was always saying, well, yes, renewables are more expensive than fossil fuel, and we need policy to kind of, close that gap and so on. Now it's not true. Now, onshore wind is more competitive pricing than any fossil fuel. Certain large-scale solar systems are competitive with any kind of fossil fuel, and they're getting cheaper. So there are some tipping points here. There are some trends that can show very quick change. The global drop in emissions, it is estimated to have been 6.4%. The UNEP and others say that we need about a 7.5% drop in global climate emissions in order to be on track. This last year shows, again, with too much pain, I'm not suggesting the pain, that the magnitude of the drop is possible. Chris, I'll turn it back over to you before we talk about policies, progressive policies.
Yeah. Just wanted to echo something going on here in the chat too about how if we do decrease the global greenhouse gases, if we end fossil fuel use of it, if we keep it in the ground, as the KIITG movement has been trying to do for a few years now, then we could see that in my number that I've read, Mark, is 20 years from when we do that, but you're saying 10, somewhere in there, we will see the temperatures rise for, say, the next 20 years, no matter what we do today. And this is a very hard thing for people to understand. We could all stop driving today. We could all stop using any fossil fuels. The temperatures will still rise for 10 or 20 years. That's a hard thing to sell to people. But what's going to happen after that is those possibility is that they will come down. And we could have disruptive technologies that improve that speed, but we don't have them yet. So given what we have, which are trees, which work very, very well and are the best technology we have right now, and we have other things, the curve could come down, but we're not going to see that for a long time. So the importance of educating people about the need to act on something really fast, really radically, and not necessarily enjoy the benefits of a cooler summer than we had in 2020 for over 10 years. 2020 will be the coolest summer we've had. That's a hard thing to sell, but we have to do it. And that's why we're trying to, inspire and engage people. And there are examples now of cities making commitments to this. San Jose is doing a great job, counties, regions, states. Because we were out of the Paris Climate Accord for a while, it actually jump-started some incredible local energy and initiatives around drawing down fossil fuel use and other things, because we were also desperate by not having a national stance that made any sense. So those are examples of positive tipping points as well, where cities are competing with each other. Santa Cruz is doing a great job trying to lead the way. Maybe Daniel influenced Santa Cruz, I'm not sure, but they're definitely trying to lead the way there. And then Daniel, you had some ideas about policies that are progressive that come out of these kind of upending situations like pandemics, and realizing that there are some really good things that have happened.
Well, yeah, as people trying to influence others, as educators, we look for current real world examples of the really ambitious things we hope to have happen. So if I tell you I want some ambitious program or policy, and you look at me kind of skeptical, then I feel a need as an educator to say, wait, look over here at something that you would not expect to have happened. So roll the clock back to before the pandemic and ask yourselves if you think in this country you would see eviction bans, rental eviction bans, if you would see direct cash payments to families of the magnitude that we have seen during the pandemic, if you think you would have seen widespread pivoting to remote work and instruction, whether it's good or bad, would you expect to have seen that? Would you have expected to see healthcare subsidies or cash payments for health in this country? These are a set of policies that are hard to imagine. I read about one of my hometowns, Evanston, Illinois, recently. Evanston, Illinois, near Chicago, has adopted a policy of providing reparations to African American residents, citizens in Evanston, Illinois, who were redlined out of real estate purchases over the 20th century. So these are unimaginable 18 months ago. They're not credible. You could not have gotten there. You would have been one of those outliers in the conversation.
Yeah, and everyone is probably aware that we have this incredible window right now. I would say at 18 months from now into the future, where we have to move everything forward in terms of infrastructure, in terms of funding, incentivizing clean, renewable engineering projects and energy projects and ecological projects and humanities and indigenous rights and human rights issues. It's really an incredible time right now that we have because of the bent of our leaders right now in Congress in the U.S. So it's a good time to take advantage. If you want to be a climate activist, come on strong for 18 months and then you can take a nice sabbatical.
No, don't take a break after that. I'm sorry.
Saying, no. We'll book you. So did you want to have any final thoughts here, Daniel, while we wrap up, and then maybe just open up for some questions? And I do want to just acknowledge the lovely, important thoughts going on in the chat. And also this Thursday, there's a giant summit by Biden pulling together 40 countries for Earth Day. So, he's taking us in the direction that I think makes a lot of sense. And I'm very heartened by that. And then the US-China joint summit just happened. So there's a lot happening in the world. And I want to just thank Daniel and Emily and Minori for being here at the very top. And yes, thank you to Iman's comment about the intersectionality of these humanitarian and inhumane issues, Islamophobia. If you look at just that in itself, what that means for the human family and what that means for ecology and the environment and global warming in itself is a whole study. And so just to know what's going on with all of our people is really, really important. But I do appreciate that you took some time to share with me some of your emotional journey. And as painful as acknowledging loss is, which is why we avoid acknowledging it, it really should help us be healthier and more balanced as we move forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Take good care. Have a great week.